Hello friends, welcome back. Now we'll see a new topic which is interviews and observation. In this topic, we'll learn many things which are related to interviews and observation which are used to for user experience. So these are the two things where been used for research method. So let's take a look what else all we are going to cover in this lesson. First, we'll see user interviews. How do user interviews? Why do we use user interviews? How to do a user interview? Limitation of interviews. How to conduct user observations. Type of user observations. So these are the outline of our lesson. Let's take a look one by one in depth. First, we'll see a user interviews. To have a user interviews, we'll use the method how, when, and why to conduct them. So, user interviews has become a popular technique for getting user feedback mainly because they are fast and easy. Use them to learn about users' prescriptions of your design, not about its usability. A user interviews in a UX research method during which a researcher asks one user question about during which a researcher asks one question about a topic of interest, for example, use of a system, behaviors, and habits, with the goal of learning about that topic. Unlike focus groups, which involve multiple users at the same time, user interviews are one-on-one session, although occasionally several facilitators may take turn asking questions. In UX interviews tend to be a quick and easy way to collect user data, so they are often used, especially in lean and agile environments. They are closely related to generalistics interviews and to the whatever narrower and more formal HCI method called the critical incident technique, which was introduced in 1954 by John Flanagan. Although you may feel that doing a UX user interview is simple and straightforward, there is more to a good interview than many people realize. Here I distill some of the best practice. Now we'll see the next. Why do user interviews? Interviews gives insights into what users think about a site, an application, a product, or a process. They can point out what site content is memorable, what people feel is important on the site, and what idea for improvement they may have. They can be done in a variety of situations, like before you have a design to inform personas, journey, maps, features, ideas, workflow ideas. To enrich a contextual inquiry, study by supplementing observation with description of tools, process, bottlenecks, and how users perceive them. All the end of a usability test to collect verbal responses related to observed behaviors. Do defer the interview until after the behavior observation segment of the usability study. If you ask questions before the participant tries to perform tasks with your design, you will have primed the user to pay special attention to whatever features or issues you ask about. Next, How to do a user interview. Ask product stakeholders what they want to learn from their desired determine the main goal, ensuring that it's realistic to board of a goal like learn about users is likely to make interviews fail because it will not focus your questions in a direction relevant to your design needs. A concentrate, concentrate goal related to a specific aspect of the user's behaviors or attitudes can bring the team to consensus and direct how you will construct the interview. Some examples of good interview goals are: how do nurses feel about logging medical data, and what are the processes they believe they use. Learn how Learn how architects share CAD drawing with engineers and where they feel that are changes are opportunities. Find out how bicycles courier get the best route direction and why they feel work well, where they think there are issues and how they think things could be improved. Make the user feel as comfortable as possible. Create a rapport with the user. People are most likely to remember, talk, and let their guard down if they feel relaxed and trust the interviewer and the process. Here are some tips for an effective interview. Have a video call, a phone call, or at least some interaction with the user before the interview itself. Before the interview day and also at the start of the actual interview, explain the reason for the interview and how the data from it will be used. Make the user feel heard by taking notes, nodding frequent eye contacts, offering acknowledgement like "I see" and repeating the word the user said. Let user finish their thoughts, do not interrupt them. Don't rush the user, pause, slow down your pace of speech. Talking slowly has a calming effect and indicates that you are not announcing and that you have time to listen. Start with questions that are easy to answer and that are unlikely to be interpreted as personal or judgmental. For example, instead of "What was the last book you read?" try "What do you like to do in your spare time?" The latter is open-ended while the former assumes the user read a book recently. Those who did not may feel stupid. Show some empathy by asking related questions, but recall that it is difficult to act sympathy without also being leading or making assumptions. For example, imagine that a user said he could not reach the customer support team. You can show some concern by asking the user to elaborate. "You could not reach support. Can you tell me more about that?" You could even try a question like, "How does that make you feel?" but only if the user did not already indicate how he felt. For example, if the user already verbally or even non-verbally expressed frustration when recalling the event, then asking how he felt could seem as thought the interviewer had not been listening. As an empathetic human being, You might want to say, "That much have been frustrating," or "I'm sorry, your time was wasted like that." But those could be leading points. Instead, asking a question that related to the user feelings can show that you are listening and feel for their plight. At the absolute end of the interview, you can express some of these more apologistic sentiments. Be authentic and don't fake empathy. Acting make your distance obvious. It is better to be yourself. Don't say something if you don't genuinely feel it. Keep in your mind that there's a big difference between rapport and friendship. The user does not have to really like you, think you are funny, or want to invite you out for a cup of coffee in order to trust you enough to be interviewed. So before going to an interview, prepare questions for an interview. While you will likely think of questions while sitting with the user, do bring to the interview a list of questions you aim to have answered. A question list ensure that you will be able to get your team feedback about your questions before the interview. Remember everything that you wanted to know and ask user about as many as of the right topic as possible during the interview process. Construct clear, non-leading questions better than you could in the moment. Overcome your stress or fatigue by having questions on hand to refer to. Anticipate different response and construct follow-up questions based on your research goal. Of course, the whole reason you are doing interviews is because you don't already know or feel completely confident about what people will say. At anticipating answers to the best of your ability can help you better prepare for the interview. Think about what you could do if you hit a dead end. In other words, if the user did not have a response for your question, are there ways in which you can help the user to find an answer? For example, imagine you are working on a new travel website and that a participant was recruited because she has booked travel online within the last 6 months. Let's pretend that some of the research goals of the interviews are: do people remember how they choose vacation destination? What's memorable about vacation? What do user feel is easy about booking travel now? To begin, ask user if they can recall a time when they booked travel. Prepare additional questions is in case they cannot remember a relevant event right away. See the image below for a possible flow addressing that situation. Here is an example of how two different people might respond to the same question follow-up questions. In gray box that the interviewers may ask to get to the same place. On the first column, if you see, one question solid information. In second column, four questions to solve the same information. Think for a few moments about some time when you booked a trip online. Wait for a response. User indicates she has a trip in mind. User indicates Boston. Can you tell me a little about why you choose Boston? Now, in the second column, if you see, think for a moment about some time when you booked a trip online, wait for a response, then user indicates she does not have a trip in mind. Can you think of any place you traveled to in the last year? User indicates she has a few trips in mind. Where did you go? So the question should be again related to the last question. User lists some place she went. Do you remember who booked the travel for any of these trips? User indicates trips include Boston, booked by friends, family, colleagues, and herself. For the Boston trip that you scheduled, can you tell me a little about why you choose Boston? So here we got to know by asking multiple questions to the same related questions. To get the answer, we do make a question prepared ready in our mind. Write dialogue provoke an interview questions. In each question, ask for just one thing instead of do you use a navigation system, and if so, which one? Try how often do you use a navigation system? Then follow up with which one or ones do you use? Jog the memory by asking about specific events rather than about general processes. Remembering and indicate will nudge the user memory and enable them to talk about precise occurrences. For example, imagine the interviewer is a doctor who wants to know the last time a patient had an asthma attack. He reviewed the patient history and anticipated some questions. An interview might go like the one in the image what we are going to see. So in this image, the gray box is what we ask the question. In the image, if you see, doctor reviewed patient's asthma triggered and prepared question about those. Have you had an asthma attack since the last time I saw you? Patient says, no, I feel great. So the next question doctor asks, that's good. Have you been traveling a lot? Patient says, yes. Doctor asks, have you gone to any exotic place? A patient says again, I was in London in May and Singapore in January, in the month Jan. So the next question from the doctor asks, how long is the flight to Singapore? The patient says, so long, actually my lung got a little tight on the flight and I had to use my rescue inhaler. So here the doctor got triggered on the patient's answer. So here the patient got asthma attack, the last asthma attack in the flight while it was so long in the flight. After you ask about an event, example an asthma attack, wait a few moments to give the user an opportunity to think about that event. Then begin asking questions about the event such as when did that happen? Or what were you doing before that happened? Avoid leading closed or vague questions. Ideally, our questions should elicit rich and based answers from the interview. Leading questions prime the user by inadvertently suggesting a response. For example, Questions like, why do you enjoy using the Acme product so much? Suggestions that the user uses the product and enjoys using it. A better question might be, why do you use the Acme product? Close questions, electric yes or no answers. For example, if an interviewer asks, so you use the Acme products each morning, then the participants could sincerely respond with just a yes and not elaborate. A better question might be, can you tell me about how you use Acme? If you see, these are some the close questions and a leading questions. A caveat: while close questions are less likely to elicit worldly answers, they are easier for user than open-ended questions. Sometimes you can decide an open-ended question which is with a close one to ease the user into a topic or product or protect user from feeling stupid when they don't remember an event. For example, do you remember what when that happened? Yes. When was it? Next, prepare more questions than you believe you will have time to ask. Some participants like to talk and give very long answers to questions. Others need promoting in the form of follow-up questions to deliver the same amount of information. Be ready to address both situations. Practice your go-to follow-up questions. Have at the ready some clear phrases to promote users to elaborate and answer. Next, locations for interviews. User interviews can be conducted in many different locations. At the user side, in a controlled environment like a lab, or remotely using online meeting tools. Consider these factors when choosing locations. User convenience and comfort. Which location will be most comfortable and easiest for the user? Will it be more likely that they will not cancel if the session is in their office or at their homes? Team conven- convences. Do you want your team to observe the interviews? Context and examples. Is it important that users have their own tools and other environmental elements at the interview? Artifacts can nudge the interviewing memory and can also paint a better picture of the user's process for the interviewer. However, sometimes getting people out of their usual environments can help them think freely and creativity. Bias: is the location likely to slave the user stories? If you brought people to your Acme office and asked about Acme usage, will they say more nice things about Acme than if they were in a different location? Spoiler alert, the answer is yes. Next, we'll see the limitation of interviews. Unlike behaviors data that captures how participants interact with a design, data from interviews is self-reported. It reflects users' prescription and feelings about a process, a site, or an interaction. Like any self-reported data includes that from focus groups, and surveys. Interview data is tenure because human memory is flawed, so people don't recall events fully or accurately. Participants don't know exactly what is relevant for the interviewer, so sometimes leave out details. They usually don't think minor interaction are important enough to bring up. Some people are proud or private, others are shy and easy to embarrass. Thus, not everybody will share every detail with the stranger. Interviews are a quick and easy way to get a sense of how users feel, think, and what they perceive to be true. Do them but complement them with observation-based research to attain an accurate and throughout sense of what users recall, do, and a higher feelings of confidence with the information you collect. Next, we'll see how to conduct user observation. Observation users interacting with a product can be a great way to understand the usability of a product and to some extent the overall user experience. Conducting observation is relatively easy as it does not require a huge amount of training and it can be relatively fast depending on the same size of user you intend to observe. Observational studies have long been conducted in psychology, and the technologies used for user research are very much the same as those used in psychology. They have their strengths and their weakness too. The two most common techniques used for observing users are controlled observation and neutralitic observation. We will take a look at both of these techniques in a few moments. Preparing for user observation. Before we decide on a technique for our observations, it's important to do a few things first. We need to decide what we accept to learn from our observational study. Can this be structured? For example, a checklist developed, or will it be unstructured? For example, we accept the data to be qualitative rather than quantitative. We need to recruit participants for our research and ensure that we have selected a relevant sample size of our user base to make our results meaningful. We need to recruit observation, ideal trained observation, and define how we will observe participants. We should be able to explain to participants what they will be doing and what they will be observed for. We should be able to explain to participants how their data and any data collected will be used and how it won't be used. Type of user observations. The good news is that we learn to observe from very young age and it's something everyone can do it. So let's take a look at the two most common forms of observation. 1. Controlled observation. Second, neutralitic observation. Let's see what controlled observation means. It tends to take place in a laboratory environment. It is focused on revealing quantitative quantitative data through it may also yield qualitative observations. To carry out a controlled observation, it's best to formulate a series of observations and have the observation carry this out at each step in the process. They can then record their observation quantitatively, for example, yes or no, or a rating scale out of 3 or 5 against each step. This does not preclude them for adding any additional observation freehand against each step, enabling the collection of additional qualitative data. The advantages of this approach includes easy to reproduce if you use a quantitative approach. It should be easy to get similar result by repeating the research. This may be important if the results are challenged at a high level in an organization. Easy to analyze. Quantitative data requires less effort to analyze than qualitative data. Quick to conduct. While recruitment may take a little time, a lab-conducted controlled observation is fairly fast to run. There is a possible drawback to this approach too. They are the Hawthorne effect. This is an understanding that the act of observation of how someone does something can change their approach to carry out the task. Next, the second one is neutralistics observation. A neutralistics observation involves studying the user in the wild and tends to be less structured. Through a structured approach is certainly possible to a in the wild observation. It's really just a repeat of a controlled observation but outside of the lab. This means spending time with a user or group of users and observing their behaviors with the product as they use it in a day-to-day life. The observer records their observation as they see fit. This is very much an approach which leads to qualitative output. Advantages of this approach includes more reliable. When people use a product in real life, they are much more likely to encounter the frustration of real life uses than they are in a lab following a set of instructions. More useful for ideation. Qualitative research can generate lots of ideas for product improvement as it opens up possibilities that are not found in quantitative research. However, there are some disadvantages to using this method too. They are it's difficult to include a representative sample. This kind of research is more expensive and time consuming to conduct than controlled observation, and that limits the research of the researcher. Limits the reach of the research. It's better to use this kind of research to create ideas and then test those ideas with other forms of research than to rely on the output of the research as gossip. Then, it's difficult to make them replicable because of the problem with sample size. You are going to find very difficult results if you repeat that research. This is double true if you use a different observation. Next, it's hard to manipulate external variables. For example, if it's raining when you observe your users working on a smartphone, this behavior is likely to be different to when it's sunny. You have no control over the weather in the wild. What to look for during user observation? It can help when it comes to qualitative observation to have some touch points to examine. What are users actually doing as opposed to what you expected they might do? What routines do users have with the product? How are they integrating it into their lives? record details. Record details, adding granularity and specificity to an observation can make it much more meaningful. Ensure you are examining activities in their whole. Look at how the product is used in context with their device and the flow of their lives, and not just at the product itself. Don't be afraid to get quantitative. If you see an example of behavior that you think may be repeated, make a note of it and look for it in future observations. It's important that you don't spend time analyzing what is going on during a user observation. The key is to just watch and report on the details. Analysis comes later, as Jiddu Krishnamurti says. Observation without evaluation is the highest form of intelligence. Next, we'll see reporting on observations. It is fairly easy to report on controlled observation. The quantitative aspects can be considered into graph or tables. Qualitative analysis should be treated more curiously and data complaint and used as signpost to future research rather than being accepted as absolute truth. Observational research is easy. Sit, watch, and record what you see and hear when a user interacts with a product. Of course, it's easy in theory. Getting to the neatest of observation takes practice and a keen interest in your subject. However, user observations are a great way to find out more about how a product is used and to identify any problem that they encounter. So here we had completed our interview and observation topic. In this we had learned how to interview types, and meanwhile at the end we learned about observation. We learned how to do with through a survey observation and a product observations. So I hope this will help you a lot while doing interviews and observations. Thanks for your patience. Thank you and enjoy.